1885. This is, of course, in the aftermath of the Great Chicago Fire, okay, that occurred in 1871. New materials, new zoning laws, fireproofing became very important in Chicago, right? For the first 40 years of this town's existence, they built predominantly out of wood. Peoples in this city, they called the town actually the Tinderbox because it caught fire so often. So, you know, quite literally after the Great Fire destroyed everything, new materials hit the scene. We actually credit William LeBaron Jenney, a former Civil War engineer, actually, who in 1885 built the first steel frame structure. The home insurance building was just 10 stories in height. It was torn down in 1931. But the fun thing, friends, is that you can wander through the downtown loop and see the world's first skyscrapers, these first steel frame buildings. They're from the 1880s, 1890s, early 20th century, and the style of architecture at that time was borrowing from ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Thanks to the efforts of Daniel Burnham and John Root and Edward H. Bennett, among others, the World's Fair of 1893 held there. Out to the forward right, just beyond those nondescript brick buildings, see that lovely off-white stone tower, see the beautiful Ionic-style Roman columns on top? Yeah, super indicative of that Beaux Arts, which is French for beautiful arts. Now those columns aren't supporting anything, right? They're purely decorative, but it does look like an ancient Roman or ancient Greco, style temple. Even the upper crust of the building looks as though someone's come across with tribalism. But as things shift and as time goes on, enter the women's suffrage movement of the 1920s, the Prohibition era of the 20s, the Roaring 20s in general. Buildings changed. Art Deco buildings, like that limestone tower there with the statue on top, that was popular at that time because they're taller. They accentuate their own heights. They have more of a mighty feel about them. They draw your eye vertically with what are called ribbon windows. The Chicago Board of Trade there is a beloved structure from 1930. The Chicago Board of Trade there was designed by Holabird and Root. I'll show you more work by that firm. The statue on top of the building as she fades away there, her name is Ceres. Ceres is the Greco-Roman goddess of grain. She pays tribute to the fact that the Chicago Board of Trade originally was a grains exchange. And some of y'all might remember the CBOT from the 2008 Batman movie, The Dark Knight. Others of you may remember the Chicago Board of Trade from the 1980s movie, The Untouchables. Yeah, showing my age. Yeah. The Untouchables. Okay. Now let me please toss you into a very different time period, post-WW2. In the 50s, 60s, and 70s, modernism. The father of modern architecture is a man from Germany named Mies van der Rohe. We often call them the Miesian black boxes. In the mid-century, corporations wanted office space. Here's a very special modern-style skyscraper. Happens to be the tallest skyscraper in Chicago. That black tower there with the white antenna above is the 23rd tallest building on the planet. 1,451 feet in height, 110 stories tall. You all know it, you love it. It is the
Sears Tower!
Good job, Noon Crew. I knew you wouldn't blow it completely. It is the Sears Tower, okay? It is now, of course, called the Willis Tower, which is interesting because nobody calls it that. Those are fighting words. I will fight strangers. Now look at that one to the right beyond the trees. Look how deliciously 90s that is. It has big crowns on top, an octagon-shaped tower in the middle, little bundle tubes on the edges, even red and pink granite on that building from Texas. That building's from the 90s, right? See how it's the opposite of modernism? After all those years of dark black boxes, when you see the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s, color, material, wow factor stuff. They began to play with the architecture. Now, I showed you 311 South Wacker very quickly, that red and pink granite tower there by Cohn, Patterson, and Fox, but I do want to bring you back to the Sears and explain to you how they built this building. Illustrated with a fistful of cigarettes, a man from Bangladesh invented this, Dr. Fazlur Khan. He worked with Bruce Graham on this building. So theoretically, by design, they are all their own buildings. All 9 of them are put together in a 3x3 configuration. They're bundled up, they sway in the wind as one. Note how only 2 of the 9 bundled tubes that make up the Sears go all the way to the 110th floor. Smile and wave at the Sears, to Chicago's tallest. There are people in those glass boxes up there taking your photograph. Yeah, and you know they've zoomed in on you. Cameras today, right? Have you been up there to the Sears, to the sky deck? When you walk out onto the ledge, yeah, please do, or good job having done so. Nothing separates you in over 1,300 feet down, but about 1.5 inches of glass. And all these buildings sway in the wind. If you don't bend, you'll break, right? The Sears could sway up to 18 inches in either direction, and there'd be no structural damage. The most it ever swayed, though, was 6 inches. And that was actually enough to scare the bejeebus out of people. A 3-inch sway is enough for my homies who work on the upper floors to watch often as their doors open and close by themselves. Some guys can't handle it. They like resign day one. They're like, nope. HR did not disclose this. Period. Now here's kind of a fun thing. We just talked about Bundle 2 construction, illustrated with cigarettes, became this tall building, all these modern structures put together. Bruce Graham also built these modern buildings, but in the 1960s. These corporate soul crushers are more indicative of what modernism looks like. The Sears is just special because they kind of got fancy and creative with the engineering. So here's Gateway Center 2 and Gateway Center 1, right? They're here in the near West Loop, built above the train tracks that feed into Ogilvy and Union Station. You'll see live action trains bringing folks in and out of Chicago. And then to have some fun with this, look out there to the forward left. I mentioned Daniel Burnham earlier, the World's Fair, 1893. He also laid out the plan of Chicago 1909. A lot of the things you see are from his plan. That warehouse there with the clock above, that's from 1914. It's one of the 2 warehouses he built for the Bradley brothers, who were a mail order catalog company. I pointed out to you because it's a good sign of kind of how the industry is what drove Chicago, the railroads, the meat packing, all the mail, everything kind of came through Chicago. We're here on the Great Lakes. You're here on a waterway that has always been here. This used to be a soggy onion swamp the Native Americans called Chicago. Welcome to Chicago. And then to the right of the clock, see the 5 trusses that sit on top of that little 13-story portion on the Boeing headquarters? See how deliciously 90s the Boeing is? There's nothing dark, black, boxy about the Boeing headquarters. Perkins and Will built it. See how it's an overwhelming configuration of material? The trusses on top actually hold that part of the building up because the tracks run beneath there. There are switching tracks. So some fun stuff by Perkins and Will. And then I'll toss you to the left. This one's amazing. It looks like the Sphinx. The Daily News building from 1929 has paws there at the extremities. See how the building is a lion facing the river? Help your neighbor. That's Neo-Egyptianism. Those annexes at the extremities of paws, the buildings facing the water, there's an open-air plaza in between the 2 paws. Why Neo-Egyptianism? They found King Tut's tomb in 1922. That archaeological find was a big, big deal. That find found its way into architecture. Don't believe me? Down to the right and left of the clock there, see the stone reliefs of publishers and scribes throughout time? See how they actually look like hieroglyphics? Boom. Neo-Egyptianism on our beloved Daily News building. The same firm that did the Chicago Board of Trade built that one too. And friends, a very famous poet and author used to work here in Chicago at the Daily News, a man named Carl Sandburg. Carl Sandburg once wrote a tremendous poem about Chicago. It's called Chicago. In it is terms and words like husky, burly, brawling. In that poem he says, "They tell me you are crooked, Chicago, and I believe them, for I have seen the murderer go free to kill again." Yay. What that poem does is it highlights Chicago as this like really integral, important industrial city, right? And it compliments us, but then it also talks about kind of the seedy underbelly that comes with any big property. Had to compete with the requirement to have a riverwalk and the railroad tracks that are here. That is why it looks the way it does. The specifications of this property dictated how this building would look. Getch Partners only had 37 is socketed to Mother Earth. To the bedrock beneath us, it is limestone. Now friends, as we approach Lake Street here, we have to watch our heads. Everyone do watch your heads here at Lake Street. Do not try to touch the bridge. And if someone around you is not getting this, please be mindful. And then once we clear the bridge, you leave the South Branch behind. We saw a lot of beautiful styles, a lot of beautiful buildings, but now things really open up and you can see the passing boats here at Wolf Point. I want to welcome you all to Wolf Point. This is the confluence of the 3 branches of the Chicago River. In the early years, when there were just 300 people here in 1833, they all lived along these banks. By March 4th, 1837, there were 3,000 people in Chicago. That was when we were declared a city. It takes 3 wolves to make a pack, so I've been calling this development here to our left, which the Kennedy family owns, all of it. I've been calling it the Pack. You got Wolf Point West over there. Being built right now is Wolf Point. See the 3rd floor deck? See the third floor deck? That's an indoor-outdoor pool. See how the accordion doors have opened? See those two bros sitting there broing out? If I lived there, I'd be doing that. And frankly, I'd be doing it much better. I wrote the book on broing out, bro.
RentWPE.com.
Years ago. It's a lovely luxury rental, very delicately lands in the Riverwalk beneath it. So you go from this beautiful new rental building by Pelly Architects, and then wham, we hit you with 1930. Look at this Art Deco, friends. Look at the verticality, the ribbon windows. They do that with the spandrels. The spandrels are the dark panels above and below the windows. See how they contrast against the use of limestone? It has the elegant setbacks above. This building was paid for by Marshall Field. Designed by Graham Anderson, Probst and White. The heads that you see facing the building, those were commissioned by Joseph P. Kennedy, Marshall Field, Aaron Montgomery Ward, Huntington Hartford, Julius Rosenwald, Edward Filene, and two other guys. Do come down to the Merchandise Mart later in life. Floors 1 and 2 are open to the public. The reason why Art Deco buildings have the setbacks, the reduction of mass on top, is due to zoning laws. In 1923, as we all watch our heads here at Wells Street, the city of Chicago passed laws that told developers once you build to a certain height, you got to reduce the mass of your building on top so more sunlight will come into the city streets. It took human beings 30 years of building skyscrapers before some guy was like, we're blocking out the sun.